I drove 6 hours from my surgical residency in Chicago to be at my brother's college graduation, and my stepmother met me at the auditorium doors with a clipboard and a stranger's smile. Immediate family only on the reserved side, sweetheart. You can stand in the back. I stood in the back. 3 days later, my father called, furious, asking why the $28,000 deposit on the lake house hadn't cleared from my account. I'm Nora, I'm 31, and for most of my life I thought being useful was the same thing as being loved. I grew up in Traverse City, Michigan, the oldest of three, the daughter from my father's first marriage, which in my house was always said with a faint apology attached, like a stain you mention before someone sits on the couch. My father, Greg, married Denise when I was 9. She came with a son, Tyler, a year younger than me, and within 2 years they had my half-brother, Connor. The baby everyone agreed was the real beginning of the family. I don't say that bitterly. I say it because it's just what happened the way weather happens. Denise wasn't cruel. She was efficient. She ran that house like a small, well-funded nonprofit, and I was the line item that got approved every year but never got a banner. Connor got the banners. Connor got the recital videos burned onto labeled DVDs. Connor got his baby teeth saved in a little velvet box. I got report cards signed without comment, and a bedroom that became the guest room the September I left for college. 4 months after I'd actually moved out. I went into medicine because I liked the idea of a life that ran on merit instead of mood. You did the work, you got the result. Nobody at Northwestern cared whose daughter I was. I liked that so much I didn't come up for air for almost a decade. Undergrad, then med school on loans and a partial scholarship, then a surgical residency that ate my 20s whole. I worked 80-hour weeks. I missed 2 Christmases because I was on call. I sent money home twice when Dad's roofing business had a bad stretch, quietly, through a transfer with no note, because I didn't want it to be a topic. It became a topic anyway, not at the time. At the time nobody mentioned it. It became a topic 3 years later, framed as evidence that I was the responsible one, which in my family was never a compliment. It was a job description. Once you're the one, nobody asks if you're tired. They just hand you the next thing. Connor's graduation was supposed to be a good day. He was finishing his business degree at Michigan State. The first of Denise's children to graduate college, Tyler had dropped out twice, and the whole extended family had flown and driven in. I requested the days off 4 months in advance, traded 2 call shifts to a colleague who owed me, and drove through a thunderstorm doing 45 on the highway because I refused to miss it. I'd bought Connor a watch, a real one, more than I should have spent, because despite everything I actually loved my little brother. None of this was his fault. He used to fall asleep in my bed when he was scared of storms. When I still lived in that house and storms were the kind of thing a big sister was for. I got to the auditorium 20 minutes before the ceremony, hair still damp, dress wrinkled from the car, and found my family clustered near the reserved seating, Denise in a cream suit checking her phone, my father in the navy blazer he wore to everything that mattered. I hugged my dad. He patted my back twice, the way you'd pat a coworker. There she is, Denise said, scanning me up and down. We weren't sure you'd make it. I said I'd be here. Well, she smiled the clipboard smile. The first 2 rows are reserved for immediate family, parents, siblings who live in-state, grandparents. We had to be strict about the head count with the auditorium. I looked at the second row where Tyler was already sitting, scrolling his phone, next to an empty seat that had my name written nowhere on it but was clearly, structurally, not for me. I drove 6 hours, I said. It wasn't a complaint. It was a fact I thought might be useful information. And we appreciate that, Denise said in the tone people use right before they don't appreciate something at all. But rules are rules, you understand. My father didn't look at me. He was already moving toward his seat, already done with the conversation, the way he'd been done with conversations involving me, since I was 9 years old, and learned that disagreement in this house wasn't met with an argument, just a kind of weather pattern silence that made you feel like you'd imagined the whole thing. Got it, I said. Because 80-hour weeks teach you, if nothing else, how to swallow a sentence whole and keep your face still while you do it. I found a seat in the back third of the auditorium, between 2 strangers, and watched my little brother cross a stage 200 feet away through a forest of other people's shoulders. I clapped until my hands hurt. I meant it. I didn't make the family photos afterward. Nobody came looking for me. I drove 6 hours back to Chicago that same night because I was on call at 6 the next morning, and I cried for about 40 minutes somewhere around Kalamazoo, then stopped, because crying on a highway by yourself accomplishes nothing except making the lane lines blur. Here's the part where I tell you about money, because in my family, money was never really about money. It was about who counted. When I was 26 in my third year of residency, my grandmother, my father's mother, a sharp private woman named Eleanor, who'd never had much patience for Denise, left me a modest inheritance when she passed. Not life-changing but real, about $90,000, plus a small parcel of land upstate that turned out 2 years later to sit on a mineral lease a natural gas company wanted badly enough to pay well for. I didn't advertise either fact. I'd learned by then that anything resembling good fortune, mentioned in that house, got quietly redistributed in conversation until it became a family resource rather than mine. So I kept my mouth shut, paid off my loans faster than my classmates, and didn't say a word. What I didn't keep entirely quiet about, because I was proud and 28 and finishing my fellowship, was that I'd been made a junior partner at a surgical group outside Chicago, with equity, with my name on letterhead. I mentioned it at a birthday dinner. My father said, "Good for you," and changed the subject to Connor's internship. Denise asked if junior meant I wasn't a real partner yet. I let it go the way I'd let everything go for 20 years, filing it under the heading of things that didn't matter. 3 days after the graduation, my father called. I almost didn't pick up, I was charting between cases, but old habits don't quit just because they should. "Why didn't the deposit clear?" he said. "No, hello. What deposit?" "The lake house, Bear Lake. You know we've been trying to get the family place back since your grandmother's estate settled. The seller wants $28,000 down by Friday, and the wire from your account bounced." I actually laughed, one short confused syllable. "I don't have a wire set up to anyone." "What account?" "Your account, the joint one. Your mother set it up years ago for emergencies. You authorized it, don't you remember?" I did remember, vaguely, a form I'd signed at 19. A just-in-case account my father had opened when I left for college, the kind of thing a trusting kid signs without reading because her father asked her to. I hadn't touched it in a decade. I genuinely did not know what was in it, or that anyone else could. "Dad, I haven't used that account since I was 19. Well, somebody needs to fund it, because we told the seller we had it handled and your name's the one on the authorization, so legally." "Legally," I repeated. "Don't get smart. This is the lake house, Nora. Your grandmother loved that place. This is for the family." I want to be clear about something because I've turned this part over so many times since. I did not feel rage in that moment. I felt something quieter and colder, like a thermostat dropping. I felt, for the first time in my adult life, completely and totally lucid about what I was actually worth to these people, which was a line of waffles. A reserved seat existed when something was owed by me and disappeared the instant something was owed to me. "I'm not funding the lake house," I said. "Excuse me? I wasn't family enough to sit with you on Saturday. I don't think I'm family enough to bankroll your real estate on Tuesday." The silence on the line had texture to it. Then Denise's voice picked up on another extension, the way she always hovered. "Nora, don't be dramatic. This isn't about Saturday. This is a family asset. Then let family pay for it, you ungrateful." My father started and I hung up. I'd never hung up on him before in my life. My hand was shaking but my voice, when I'd spoken, hadn't been. What I didn't tell them, because I didn't owe them an explanation anymore, was that I drove to my bank the next morning before my first case, and closed that joint authorization permanently, in person, with a notarized letter, the kind of paperwork that makes a banker raise an eyebrow and ask gently if everything's all right. I told her it was a long story. She didn't push. What I also didn't tell them was that I'd spent that same week finally talking to a financial advisor about the gas lease money and the inheritance, somebody recommended by a colleague, a careful woman named Patricia, no relation to anyone in this story. Just a person who was good at her job, who looked at my numbers and said, "You know you could buy a house outright if you wanted to stop renting." I hadn't known. Nobody in my family had ever once asked what I'd done with my grandmother's money, because they assumed correctly that asking would reveal they'd already spent emotional energy resenting me for having it, and admitting that felt worse than just staying vague. For 2 weeks after the phone call, nothing. Then my stepbrother Tyler texted me, of all people, the family member I had the least relationship with. "Hey, You okay? Mom's been weird since the lake house thing fell through. Dad's pissed. Just they're telling people you refused to help with grandma's memory lol. Wanted you to know what's being said. That landed somewhere I didn't expect it to. Not the lie itself. I'd been the villain in my family's private mythology for years quietly. The way you don't notice wallpaper until someone points at it. It was that Tyler, who'd never once defended me at any dinner table in 15 years, was the one who told me the truth. Sometimes the people with the least invested in a story are the only ones with room to be honest about it. I didn't respond to the lie publicly. I'm not built for public fights. And frankly, the people who needed to hear my version were the same people who'd watched Denise put me in the third row from the back at my own brother's graduation and said nothing. They weren't owed a defense from me. But I did call Connor. Hey, I said when he picked up surprised. Congrats again on graduating. I meant that, thanks. A pause. Are you okay? Mom and Dad are saying some stuff, I figured. I took a breath. Connor, I want to tell you something, and I need you to just listen, because I'm not trying to put you in the middle. When I came to your graduation, I wasn't allowed to sit with the family. I sat in the back. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to make your day about me. Then 3 days later, Dad called demanding I pay $28,000 toward a lake house, using an account I didn't even know they had access to. I said no. That's the whole story. I'm not asking you to pick a side. I'm asking you to know what actually happened, because you're going to hear a version that isn't that. He was quiet a long time. I didn't know you weren't sitting with us. I thought you were just running late. I wasn't running late. Nora, that's messed up. Another pause, younger brother awkward. I'm sorry, I should have looked for you after. You didn't know, still. He exhaled. For what it's worth, I don't think you owe them a lake house. That conversation mattered to me more than anything that came after, honestly. Not because it fixed anything with my parents. It didn't, and I no longer expected it to. But because it was the first time in this entire saga that someone in that family heard the actual sequence of events and didn't immediately reach for a reason it was somehow still my fault. The fallout predictably escalated before it resolved. My father, 3 weeks later, had a lawyer send a letter, an actual letter, on actual letterhead, which would have been almost funny if it weren't so exhausting, implying that as a beneficiary of family financial planning, I had an obligation to contribute to jointly understood family assets, and citing the old joint account authorization as evidence of established financial cooperation. I forwarded it to my own attorney, a sensible man named Marcus, who'd helped me with my partnership contract, and his response was 4 sentences long and ended with the phrase, "There is no enforceable obligation here, and I'd recommend not engaging further." I sent that verbatim back to my father's lawyer and never heard from either lawyer again. My father called one more time in October, 4 months after the graduation. I almost didn't answer that one either. When I did, his voice was different. Smaller, somehow, like a man who'd run out of the script he'd been using his whole life and didn't have a backup. Your grandmother would be disappointed in how this turned out, he said. My grandmother left her money to me specifically, I said, because she told me, before she died, that she'd watched this family treat me like overflow my entire life, and she wanted me to have something that was just mine, with no committee deciding how I used it. I think she'd be disappointed in a lot of things, Dad. I don't think I'm one of them. He didn't have anything to say to that. We didn't fight. We just sort of ran out of road, the two of us, on the phone 4 months after a graduation I wasn't allowed to sit at. I'm not going to tell you this story ends with a tearful reconciliation, because it doesn't, not yet, and maybe not ever, and I've made a kind of peace with that I didn't think was possible 2 years ago. I still talk to Connor regularly. He came to visit me in Chicago last spring, slept on my actual guest room bed, the one with my name on the lease, and we got dinner at a place near my apartment and didn't talk about Denise once. I talk to Tyler sometimes too, which still surprises me. It turns out the family's quietest member had been watching the whole imbalance for years, and just never had anywhere to put what he saw until I gave him an opening. I bought a condo that winter, cash, no mortgage, with Patricia's help and my grandmother's money, and the first thing I did was set up a guest room with an actual bed in it, not an air mattress, not a euphemism. I keep it ready, not for my parents, for the people who'll actually use it. My father and Denise still have the lake house, by the way. They found another way to fund it. A relative on Denise's side, I heard, though nobody tells me much directly anymore, which is its own kind of relief. I don't think about it often. I think sometimes about the second row of that auditorium, the empty seat with no name on it, and I think about how long I spent believing that being useful was the closest I'd ever get to being loved in that house. I don't believe that anymore. I found out the hard way exactly what I was worth, to people who only wanted me close when there was a bill attached. And once you know the price of your own seat, you stop showing up to sit in the back.